idea. I don't know if you saw that clip, but
I saw a tiny bit of it.
What are your thoughts on what Kirby said and what you've seen from Milroe, and do you like him at all in your game?
Oh, he's a whole lot faster and more explosive than I am, that's for sure. I do think we have very different running styles, probably overall very different playing styles, but I love his game. Honestly, I really have loved it for a long time, even before this season. You could see spurts of pieces of his game that other people just don't have and can't have. Just he's so different and gifted, and I remember parts of that really showed up last year against Arkansas when he got some of his opportunities, and then watching him over the last couple of years just in pregame, and you would see, okay, you don't know if he's going to put everything together, but you just know, okay, there's bits and pieces that could be really special. And you also, when a lot of guys walk by, like I've seen for a long time, in playing, and then the last 10 years of doing this, a lot of guys walk by. When he walks by, you're like, dang, that dude's kind of put together, And this was as a freshman, so he's very gifted, and I think the way that he's continued to take all those traits and abilities and improve them and improve his strengths, but also improve his weaknesses, his decision making. I'm going to show a tape tomorrow about him throwing with conviction in the red zone, more so now than he's ever done. His decision making, his ability to be decisive in the running game on third down and take off, but then also now what Tommy has implemented is some of the quarterback run, which I think will be more involved in this game than probably any other game, maybe other than LSU. Where it's not just zone read or scramble, but there's actually some design quarterback runs, which gave LSU fits in that game, which sometimes would look like zone read, but it's not. It's more of a quarterback keeper all the way. I think that'll be more implemented. You look at those four areas and you just think, man, this guy can really take over a game, win all of those things when he's using them well, and the team's really putting that together, which they haven't always had to, right? And so he's very gifted, a special player.
Has a lot of offensive weapons too, a lot of niche values for the Alabama defense. What does Alabama defense specifically need to zero in on when you have a guy like Brock Bowers and some other guys like that?
I think the number one key for Alabama's defense is find a way, whatever it is, to make Carson Beck uncomfortable. I don't really believe that he's been uncomfortable all year. Even when he's been behind against South Carolina, when he was behind against Auburn, the tying drive and the go-ahead drive, they got pressure and it didn't even bother him. He stepped up in the pocket and made big-time plays against Blitz Zero this year. He hasn't been uncomfortable. I don't think he got uncomfortable one time against Ole Miss. Like, you got to somewhat fluster a quarterback, and then doesn't mean you're going to get him to get sacks or turnovers. It just means you got to either get pressure, you got to be able to cover down on receivers. He's played at such a high level because he's been comfortable. He's known what the defense is doing. He knows where he's going. He knows he has the arm to be able to make it happen. I mean, he's just played so well at such a high level, and I think somehow you got to get him uncomfortable.
What does that say about a guy that's in his first year as a starter, playing in some of these big stages, that has been so comfortable, and what have you made of his game?
Well, I think it says a couple of things. One is that he's an incredible young man, and I think two, it says that what they do in practice is really good at Georgia. That when I've had the chance to sit down and talk with him, you understand that all the practices against those defenses the last couple of years was probably as hard, if not harder, than what he's experienced this year. And that's real. And when I just think that has prepared him, that when he's, his first games, and asking him, all right, your first SEC game and you're down South Carolina. Yeah, but I know who I practiced against over and over again. That creates a confidence when you know that a lot of really good players in the NFL are the guys that you've gone against the last few years. I think it's built his confidence, and he's shown it. And it's been just really fun to watch his maturity and him playing at such a high level. And obviously he doesn't have the stats that some other guys have because their style of offense isn't, they're not putting touchdowns up late in the fourth quarter. They're not, just a different style. They control the time of possession a lot more than other teams. But the last few weeks, as far as just being efficient and executing his offense, I think you have to put him as a top 5 guy, as just being as efficient and running their offense. Now, it's not always going to equate to stats, but he's playing at an extremely high level.
Hey, Tim, are these 2 of the top 4 teams in college football?
I think they're 2 of the better teams in college football. Yeah, I think Georgia's from top to bottom this year. I think they've been playing as one of the best throughout the entire season, and they've gotten better, which is scary for the level they started. And I think at times this year that Alabama has showed that they're at that level too. It's going to be really interesting to see what the committee has to say, because there's a lot of craziness that's either way. It's going to be crazy to see. I actually can't wait.
And I asked that because the last time that we got to talk to is during the Texas game. So if you looked at how Alabama has transformed from week 2 up to this
they're
point,
different. It's not the same team. And it's, we've tried to be very honest in our meetings, talking with our own team in debates in the room and then on TV. And I've said I personally struggle with it. And I argue with myself on, do you look at the improvement of Alabama throughout the season, and do you put more weight in that, or do you put more weight in the head-to-head? And the game's got to matter, but then you also got to be willing to look at the adaptation of these teams. There is very little that is recognizable about week 2 Alabama versus right now. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the committee looks at that. And I think anybody that really knows football looks and see a different team, but you also, as someone that also loves the game, the head-to-head has to matter as well. I think it's one of the hardest arguments to make right now in viewing all of it, because it's a different team, but then you're minimizing what happened this season as well, and it's hard.
Is it a tougher argument than maybe putting a one-loss Bama in over an undefeated Florida State that's a different team without their star quarterback?
I think we really have to define it. I think we have to do in my opinion, we have to do a better job of defining what we want. And if we want the 4 best, and it's not the resume, and it's not conference champs, and it's not that, I think that's one argument. If you want to put it and say that it's that we're going to look at resume, are you really saying it's the 4 best, or are you just saying it's the 4 that are the most easily justified? And I think that's something that we're going to maybe see, depending how the games go this weekend. We're going to see a little bit of it, and I'm very intrigued to see how the selection committee views all of the teams. I think Florida State, depending on what else happens, but they're going to have to win, and depending on what happens, maybe convincingly, because Louisville's lost to Kentucky, that hurts. And if they win close, and there's so many different scenarios that could happen, right? But I mean, let's just say one is, if Alabama got to win, now what's going to happen? It's going to be a lot to take into account. And I think with Jordan Travis playing, it's a different argument than without him. I do think it's a little bit of a different team. I think Jordan Travis is one of the best players, but I would say as important, if not more important, he's one of the best leaders in college football. And you're a different team. Do you punish the team for that? It's also hard for me to understand, but if you say, hey, on head-to-head, who's a better team now, I do think it changes the argument.
You talk about the growth of Alabama. How have you seen Georgia grow from when we talked to you back before that Kentucky game to now, especially considering the time that they spent without Brock Bowers and banged up playmakers elsewhere?
How has Georgia improved in that?
Yes.
I think they're improved, but I don't know if it's just improved or it's that we got to see that they're able to do different things as well. So I think it's both. I think that, there's so many other guys that they're so gifted, and sometimes I think we minimize that. It's not Nick Chubb in the backfield, it's not Sony Michel, it's Lad's out. They got a lot of dudes that can go play. Oscar Delp is a backup tight end. That's also one of the better tight ends, I think, in the SEC. They got an embarrassment of riches, and I think when you got a quarterback like Carson, that it's not I'm just going to one guy. I mean, he's going to wherever the coverage reads, whatever the game plan is. And I love it that when Brock came back, the majority of the time they used him as a decoy, and he works that way, and he helps the team that way. So I think it's also important to give Mike a lot of credit for his designs and what he's done and his game plans, because they have been excellent, especially Ole Miss.
I was going to ask about Kendall Milton.
Yeah.
Kendall Milton.
Yeah.
You were talking about different players.
Yeah.
Milton,
He's gotten so much better. I think so. I think he's improved, and I don't think people realize what a big boy he is when he gets going downhill. And the offensive line has really come together, and their double teams are silly right now, moving people off of the ball. That's another breakdown we're going to do tomorrow. Is the Alabama does a really good job with their interior defensive line of fighting through double teams, not getting pushed, and Georgia does such a good job with their offensive line of staying on double teams and making the backers work over the top, and that gives running lanes. And so that's a fascinating matchup that I'm excited. Maybe it's not as glorious to talk about as other matchups, but I'm really excited. And for a back like Kendall, when he gets going downhill, when you get a linebacker peep one side or the other and he's downhill, doesn't matter, you get arms on him, he ain't going down. And I just think he's continue to improve, more confidence, that rhythm that backs get into. I've seen that a lot more, especially I think it was maybe starting Tennessee game. Yeah, he's hard to bring down, especially when he's less of this and more of this.